Jones. I am the founder and CEO of Translash Media, which is a journalism and narrative change nonprofit media organization that works to center the humanity of trans people, specifically trans people of color, through a variety of ways. Because it's, our belief at Translash, it's my belief as the founder, that a lot of the violence that we experience is because of ignorance about us. And I mean that literally in the exact definition of ignorance, that is, say, the lack of knowledge. And that lack of knowledge allows people to who wish to do us harm to manipulate stories and ideas about us in order to be able to exact violence against our community. And so it's our belief that by centering us as people, that's a way to combat that ignorance and then to lower the violence against our community. Violence in all of its forms, cultural violence, political violence, policy violence, and ultimately physical violence. And yeah, so that's what I do. And I'm a journalist, and luckily I've been fortunate to be able to get a lot of recognition for my work, but essentially that's who I am and what I do.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. And you kind of answered my question as to what inspired you to create Translash, the organization.
Yeah.
Besides that, you also have the Translash podcast as well. Yeah, can you let us know a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I can go a little bit deeper on the first question. I mean, I created Translash in 2018, and it was halfway through the Trump administration. And people, so much has happened, but that was the time when government for the first time was being actively mobilized to discriminate against trans people in a way that people alive had not seen, right?
Right.
And so therefore it occurred to me that we were increasingly becoming a topic. And so essentially what happened is that a colleague of mine encouraged me to tell the story of what it was like to be trans during the time of Trump. And when they first advised that I do that, the first thing that I said to them was, why would I do that? Because no one's going to care. And the fact sometimes you don't know what you actually think until you hear it, until the words leave your mouth and the sound passes your ears.
Right.
And when I realized that was what was active, I was like, oh my God. Well, first of all, I don't believe that, because my whole career has been devoted to telling stories and uplifting narratives, because I understand that is a key ingredient to social change. But it's also the fact that I realized that if I thought that as a trans person, then other people who weren't trans think that. And so it was an even greater imperative to do something. So what I did was I essentially called in a favor of a friend who worked on an Atlanta reality show. And I said, you're going to spend the next 6 months following me around the country. And so that's how we started the first Translash short documentary. That's how Translash actually started, was me putting up short documentaries on YouTube. They're still there. And then from that, kind of my commitment to grow Translash grew and or increased. And so therefore I just began to put kind of all of my energy in doing that. And so over time we made more short documentaries, then added social media, and then we did a website, and then from that started the podcast. And so now Translash is not one but three podcasts that I host. We do we do short documentaries, we do long form documentaries, we do animation, we have a zine, we have a writing platform, and then we have digital and social media. So there's just a lot of content that we produce across. Now our flagship brand, our flagship media property that people know about is the Translash podcast with Imara Jones, which I host. But then we also have an investigative series podcast called the Anti-Trans Hate Machine: A Plot Against Equality, which looks into the people, the money, the organizations, the politicians, and the media network that's driving anti-trans narratives. We just started a subscription podcast on our paid tier on Apple Podcasts called The Mess, which is every 2 weeks, which is essentially a show about, it's called The Mess, Imara's Guide to Our Political Hellscape. So it essentially just breaks down through a trans lens what's going on in politics, which is really vital in this season. And then we have a lot of branded short documentaries, Trans Bodies, Trans Choices, on the intersection between reproductive justice and trans rights. We have another series called Artistic Legacies, which uplifts 3 people from Black trans femmes in the arts. We have a PBS documentary that's coming out in June called American Problems, Trans Solutions. So there's a lot of content that we produce. And I think what I love about the podcast, the Translash podcast, is that, and what I love about podcasting in general is that it's such an intimate, if you allow it to be, it's a really intimate medium. And so you really can get into who a person is and why they do what they do and who they are. And because it's not visual, it's less threatening and people are actually more open. And so I think that what we do in that is that we really get to explore people beyond the headlines. And we've done that with a lot of different people like Janelle Monáe and T.S. Madison and other trans people across the board. And yeah, it's a really powerful thing to do.
Yes, it's very powerful and very inspiring to see it unfold, and just knowing the lives that you touch through these channels during these unsettling times is just nothing short of amazing.
Thank you.
I did want to ask, what are the 3 initiatives you'd like to speak out about regarding what's going on in legislature right now?
Yeah, 3 things that are top of mind for me that are going on in the legislature. I think several things stand out to me. I think one, the fact that we became a focus of the House of Representatives this year, through bills that passed the House, not the Senate, like, the sports ban, and the fact that one of the reasons why we're just getting a federal budget as of this weekend, when that's supposed to happen in September, is because, the Republicans were obsessed with trans people and we're putting all of these, what they call riders, but they're essentially laws that you can't get passed by themselves. So you attach them to the budget bill because everyone knows the budget bill is going to have to pass. And so you hope that whatever you're trying to do will get through that way. They attached a bunch of things about trans people in them and they wouldn't let it go. And we almost shut down the government 3 times and have a federal government that is funded, what is it? 7 or 8 months late because of that obsession. I think the second thing that occurs to me is just the number of state bills that we have this year. We already have more bills introduced in the first 3 months of 2024 than in all of last year.
All of 2023, yes.
So that's very aggressive. And then I think thirdly, kind of on that point, is not only the number, but the quality of those bills is so aggressive, denying the ability of people to change their gender marker on their driver's license, like in Kansas and in Florida, and the way in which that fundamentally means that people will be disenfranchised, you won't be able to vote, and you will be exposing people to violence because their gender marker doesn't match what they may appear as. I think that family child separation stuff that we're seeing is wild, in Florida and in Texas, where in Texas, if you if a family affirms their trans child, the state can declare that child abuse and take that child away and put them in foster care.
Mhm.
And now in Florida, you can change custody based upon, if a parent supports their trans kid. So I think it's just how aggressive these bills are getting. And I think that people aren't as aware of that because one, there's so much, but also most people, and this is just true for everybody, don't pay attention to state and local politics.
Right. Right.
You don't follow what's going on in your state legislature. That's just everybody does that. And so
Mhm.
I think that like there's a lack of knowledge about what's happening in the states.
Yeah, every time I talk to people about voting and the importance of registration, I'm like, it's not just about the presidency. It's
Um,
about getting involved in your local city council, knowing who your
exactly.
city
School
district
board.
representatives are, your school board representatives. All that is important to the people.
Mhm.
And that needs to be drilled in every single time we talk
That's
about
right.
voting and registration. So I completely agree on that. Um, what are your thoughts on the intersections when it with within the trans community and issues with civil rights?
Can you be a little bit can you tell me a little bit more on that?
Yeah, when I speak of the intersections between trans rights and civil rights, what are your thoughts on how people can navigate through that to understand that trans rights are also part of our civil rights, but they run parallel to each
Oh, I
other.
see what you're saying. Yeah, the way in which like yeah, no, I know what you're getting at. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, the
I'm
way in
trying
which
to say it in a nice way.
you don't have to say it in a nice way because you're gonna write the story, so you can just characterize my answer. Um, I mean, I think that what you're getting at is the feeling that other people who are progressive or liberal, when
Mhm.
it comes to trans rights, aren't always there. And
Right.
that's what you're getting at, right?
Yeah.
Don't always name it. And how that even happens in Black communities, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, what do I think about that? Well, I think that those people haven't learned from history, is what I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think those people haven't learned from history and they aren't aware of where we are now. I'll say both of those things. Why do I say that? The first thing is that they aren't aware of history because they have a belief that we can't ask for too much and that we have
Mm-hmm.
to ask for the rights of marginalized and disenfranchised people one by one over time. And that if we do that one by one over time, then that's the way that we'll get liberated. And that's been a total failure. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
work, right? That doesn't work. Um, One, because that's actually a divide and conquer strategy. It's a way to prevent there to be complete liberation for everyone because you're telling people, well, we'll give you rights, gay men, but don't be too loud about those trans people because, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to help you win. Okay, that's fine. So you get something like gay marriage, that's great. And those people think we're safe, it doesn't matter. And so then they're not they're not pushing as hard for your rights. But then what happens is that you then have, a change in policy, a change in administration, who suddenly says, "Oh no, gay people, we don't want you to have those rights," and so now they're rolling
Mm-hmm.
back. So what happens is that through that divide and conquer strategy, and by essentially picking off the community one by one, you disrupt the ability for there to be change. So what I'm saying is that like that approach of like, we have to be careful, we have to be acceptable, we have to move slowly, that's been a failure. That's why, we don't have complete liberation, for example, for Black people, you know, hundreds of years after the end of slavery, 160 or so. Why is that? It's because not all Black people were freed at the same time in the same way. And consequently, that meant that no one was actually truly free, right? Black men got the right to vote, got full citizenship. After the Civil War, Black women didn't get it until 1965.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea that like this is the way that things can move, I think is false. It's been a failure. The second reason why I think that this is an issue and why I say that they don't know where we are now, they don't understand the way in which the Christian nationalist movement is actually using trans people as a test run for how to bring about authoritarianism in the United States. And their test run on our community isn't only about us, although it is about us. It's to see how they can do this across a series of communities that they don't like. So if you
Mm-hmm.
understand that they're coming for your neck too through the
Right.
attacks on us, then you don't know where we are. So I think that people are delusional if they don't make these connections. I know it's a hard thing
Absolutely.
to say, but I think it's true.
Yes, I totally agree. Um, you do so much in the world of activism. Um, what's your motivator, or what motivates you to continually push through the heaviness of it all on a daily basis? Like just being in this community and in this fight, and it can get really heavy sometimes. What drives you to push through that heaviness and those stressors?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. So I just wanted to say that like it's very funny because if you read my bio, I never use the word activism, right? I say that I'm a journalist and I'm a storyteller, and that's what I do. The problem is that, or the challenge is that like a part of my job is to tell people what I know,
Mm-hmm.
to tell people what I've been able to learn, to tell people what I've been able to discern. Those are key parts of my job. And people will look at that and say that that's activism, but I think it tells us more about the time that we're in, that people are that there are not enough people who are speaking plainly and directly, right? And transparently about the
Mm-hmm.
reality of where we are. And so people say that that's activism, right? But what I say that I'm actually doing is that I'm just doing my job. If I learn something as a journalist, if I learn something as a researcher, it's incumbent upon me to tell you, right?
Right.
Right. And so that process of me telling people is like, oh, this person's an activist, but that means that there's not enough of that that's happening across the board, you know?
Mm.
So I just wanted to say that. The second thing I wanted to say is about that. What keeps me going? I don't know whether or not, I think that we will ultimately win. I don't know if we will win in the way that we want in this lifetime. But I know that the only way to win is to speak up and speak out. That's it. That's the only way that change is going to happen. Um, and it is incumbent upon me as a journalist to care about freedom and liberation, because that's why journalism is actually written into the Constitution, because it is seen as being a key pillar of democracy, right?
Right.
And so I think that that's what keeps me going as well, is that like the only way that things are going to change is if we speak up and speak out about them and we're not silent.
Mm-hmm.
I think thirdly, what keeps me going is I just thought about this when you asked me, is that like I think that I come from I come from a family of warriors. And I think that that is a part of one of the things that drives me, is understanding that we're in the battle for life, right?
Right.
Like, and that's how we have to approach it in a way,
Mm-hmm.
especially as marginalized people. My parents are really active in the civil rights movement in a very dangerous place at a very dangerous time in Southwest Georgia. My dad had threats on his life. My mother was jailed and all these other things. And I think that just those growing up with those stories and with people whose tradition that was, I think it kind of infused me with the understanding that like this is also a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think consequently, that helps me keep going because I understand that sometimes this is how we have to be.
Okay. Okay. I that's perfect. And I love the way you described I'm a journalist. I'm not an activist per se, just what I do. I speak truth
Mhm.
to wrong. And that's a powerful statement because a lot of people don't see it that way.
Right,
And
and we
like,
should, and like if everybody was doing that, it wouldn't seem to be activism. I think that what is different is that like I try to communicate in a very direct way so that everyone understands me, regardless of their background. And I
mhm,
think that a lot of things get in the way of other people doing that. And I don't think that it's always, that they're trying not to.
mhm,
I think we have a society where people have been conditioned um to say things in a way that aren't going to offend, right?
mhm, right.
Um, or and that are not going that are not going to disturb people. Uh,
Mhm,
and I think that, yeah, I think that I just, well, I'm just gonna say something you understand. I just make it plain.
yeah, yeah. Plain and simple. Now, I heard that you are also co-chair of the New Pride Agenda, the wonderful people at New Pride Agenda, Elisa Crespo and her
Love
winning
Elisa.
team, Britton Hargers, like they are a phenomenal team. How did you become co-chair of such a movement within that organization?
Well, actually, I just stepped down as co-chair last week. I'm still on the board,
Oh,
but I
okay.
was I was co-chair for over a year.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and when I become co-chair? Because Cecilia stepped down as co-chair and was like, you know, I'm hoping that you'll do this.
Yeah.
Um, that's why. Otherwise, I would not have been. That was not something that I was seeking. I was just urged to do it. And I got on the New Pride agenda because a friend of mine, an old work colleague, also was treasurer, also stepped down as treasurer last week, and was like, you should talk to these people. It's like 2019 or even 2018. It was a long time ago.
Mhm.
And we're like, you should be a part of this process. And so I kind of was at New Pride at that time, and just was a board member. And then when Elisa lost her race for city council, um, I had interviewed her for a project that we did with WNYC, and I think it was in 2019, or no, sorry, 2020. And so I had her phone number, and we were looking for a new ED, and I called Elisa and I said, like, like I would be told later, I was like, you should apply for this job. We're looking,
Mhm.
you have to do this. And so essentially I just kind of disrupted the entire search process. I really did. And we pulled Elisa in, and everyone soon agreed that she was the absolutely the right choice for the organization, and has done an amazing and stellar job. So that's how I got
Yes.
involved in
Yeah.
New Pride. And then when Cecilia stepped down as co-chair, I believe it was 2 years ago, and was like, I hope you'll do this. That's how I became co-chair.
Awesome. That's wonderful. I love that. What advice would you give someone looking to start their own 501(c)(3) organization?
It's longer and harder than you ever think, so don't get
Mm-hmm.
discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true for anything that is put on your heart to do.
Hmm.
You know, it's a longer and more difficult process than you think. But just because it's long and hard doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Right.
So don't interpret the hardship as a no.
Hmm.
Interpret the hardship as a part of the process. And then to just really believe in what you're doing, you know, like you have to see things before other people see them.
Hmm.
That sometimes is very lonely, and people are not always going to understand what you're doing or why you're doing it. And that's part of the process too, because this is something that this is a need, this is an idea, this is a passion that that no one else um, possibly has had before. And so the fact that people may not immediately get it, the fact that um, you know, things are gonna be hard for a while, just understand that that's because you're trying to bring something new into the world. And
Right.
that's always like a hard fought thing. And so I think that just keep believing, like really keep believing in yourself and your ideas and your vision. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's very true. Um, and having a 501(c)(3) myself, it is no easy feat by any means, and there's still things I'm learning. And so that advice helps me as well as anyone else look that's going to be watching this. Um, this being Women's History Month, and also the month when we celebrate trans visibility,
Mhm.
who is your role model? What your female or trans role model that inspires you? Because right now you're mine, so
Oh,
you're
thank
right there
you.
with me. So yes.
Oh my gosh. There are countless. I mean, that's what I love about our community is that there are so many amazing people from so many amazing backgrounds doing so many amazing things, despite
Hmm.
the historical and the current hardship against us, that like I get totally lifted up and buoyed by that. Who are people that inspire me? Well, now that I mean Cecilia, right? Now that Cecilia is a transgender, um,
Hmm.
I think Marsha P. Johnson is an incredible being, probably almost not human, to be perfectly honest. I could go on and on about that, but in a good way. Um, I think Jean is also another person. That's the American pronunciation of her name. It's actually Queen Jean. But I mean, that's another person who inspires me um, when I see them and I see their leadership. Maury Turner, who is in Oklahoma, who is a trans state representative there. I am inspired by Chella, who I think is amazing. There's so many people. But Chella's not a woman, but I was thinking about trans people as trans month of visibility. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so I think of all of those people, and the amazing thing is that I could go on and on. I could go
Hmm.
I could literally go on and on with the number of people that I think of. Andrea Yearwood, I'm inspired by her, you know, the trans athlete who was targeted by the Christian nationalist movement and forced out. How strong
Hmm.
those like girls had to be when they were there. CC Telfer, who I mean, just it's a lot of folks. It's a
Yeah.
lot of folks.
Yeah.
Um, it's not it's not a it's not a small number, which also I think is really amazing because if you think about like what we're able to do under these circumstances, like that, there's something that's powerful about that. There's something that's like totally magical
Hmm.
about that and magical about us. And I think it's because we can see possibility because we've had to see possibility in order to be ourselves, right? Like
Right.
there's no way that we have become who we are against all of the odds without a tremendous sense um of our own ability to manifest. And if you're able to do that, then you're able to do that in a lot of other ways, right? Like all the things that you do, right? How are you able to manifest all of these different things, right? It's because you tapped into your own power to transform. You know what I mean? And so then like that then gets unleashed on the world. And I just think that as trans people, like because of the unique experiences that we have and the unique gifts that um that it's also our duty, to the extent that we can, to not be small. Like we're called to be largeness, right? And I think that there's a reason why in sort of pre-colonial, pre-Western societies that we were always called to be larger.
Right. Okay. Now, what brings you peace and joy? What brings Imara peace?
Water.
Plain and simple, water. Yeah.
Water.
Yeah. So last question, where can we stay connected with Miss Imara Jones?
In a lot of places. Oh, let me just say one more thing. I think the reason why I say water is because, like, you know, our bodies are water, and so we actually vibrate at the same frequency as water. And so when we're in water, next to water, can see water, can drink water, can be in water, it is peaceful.
Yes.
That's the tone that we vibrate at.
The ebb and flow of water and the tranquility of it. I totally relate. I'm a Pisces, so I'm a water.
I'm speaking your language as a Pisces.
You really are. Once you said water, that's why I'm like, enough said. Water. Like
water.
That's peace. Like I just, when I'm down and out, just get me to a body of water and I'm finding my happiness.
You're good.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
So where can
people can find me on the social medias. My website is imarajones.com, but no one really does websites anymore. But
they do. I know a couple.
Yeah, you know, I guess so. But my social my Instagram is my name. It's pretty easy. It comes right up. And then so is Twitter, and I refuse to call it its new name. Twitter and Facebook, and also TikTok. Those are all pretty simple and easy ways. And then of course you can find Translash at Translash Media. Super easy.
Okay. Yeah, I follow you on TikTok. There's some pretty funny videos on there. I enjoyed it. All right, Miss Imara Jones, thank you so much for allowing this interview to happen. It was an honor and pleasure in meeting you. I hope I get to meet you face to face one day. And is there anything else you would like to say to our audience before we sign off?
Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. Because there's a light at the end of that tunnel.
Right.
Even though it seems far.
Right. And then also, even though the world tells you opposite, right? You are the light in the tunnel.
I like that. I like that. You're that beacon of hope.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. I love that.
And you're the light that other people are following in the tunnel.
And some of us feel that way too. Like we see that. But it's hard for a lot of people to see that within themselves.
It's because the world has convinced us of a lie. And I think that that's the hardest part of what we go through, right? Is to detox from the lies that have been put upon us. That's actually the hardest part. you know,
Yeah.
and anyone who is telling you that you are less than, you are not worth, you are not worthy, you do not deserve, your body doesn't matter, your ideas don't matter, who you are doesn't matter. Like that becomes a mantra, right? And it's
Hmm.
in a lot of different ways. And so if you get that in your head, then ultimately that's the way that actually humans are reprogrammed, right? You start believing it, um, and the darkness can close in. And I think that the challenge is there's no easy way to do this, but the challenge is to deprogram from that and to stop believing the lies, to stop believing the lies, because
Hmm.
that you've been told the opposite is actually true. Or people wouldn't spend so much energy telling you what you're not. The reason why people spend so much energy telling you what you're not is because they know that you are, and that the only way that they can stop you is to convince you that you are not. So it is our
Right.
duty, it is our duty to believe that we are, we can, we deserve, we will, we
And
can.
know that when it comes to voting, you can make a change. Don't believe the lie that you can't.
Absolutely. I mean, I tell people this all the time. Like the reason why they're trying to convince you that your vote doesn't matter is because your vote does matter. Like
Right.
it's very simple. They wouldn't be spending so much time getting you to think that voting doesn't matter and stopping you from voting if they didn't realize that voting matters, right? If it didn't matter, they wouldn't have to spend time trying to tell you that it doesn't matter, right? Like you would just know that. But they understand that, like, look, for example, Joe Biden, whatever you think, I'm just giving you a fact. Joe Biden won the last election by 45,000 votes, right? Um,
Hmm.
the Republican Party is passing laws that have disenfranchised or will disenfranchise 200,000 trans people in the next election. So just do the math. If Joe Biden
Right.
won by 45,000 and that they're trying to stop 200,000 trans people from voting, guess what? They know your vote matters.
Hmm.
They know your vote matters. So stop convincing yourself that your vote doesn't matter. It certainly will matter in those school board races where they're trying to make these schools hostile to trans kids. It sure will matter in local state legislator races when those people are up there trying to take away and block your humanity and your rights. And those races are always won by a couple hundred votes. Like we're not talking about, you know what I mean? Like we're
A
not talking,
landslide.
right,
It's always,
landslides or
yeah.
like huge numbers of people. I mean,
Hmm.
just pull like the vote from yours, excuse me, where you live, and just see how many votes that the president gets, and it narrows. And when you, by the time you get down to like, school board or state legislature, those votes are those races are won by a couple hundred votes. Like you're not
Minuscule.
minuscule, minuscule.
Yes.
So
Hmm.
like they understand that, and so that's why they're trying to tell you that you don't matter. And if there are 200 trans people in your school district, which it almost is true everywhere, if y'all vote one way or another, you can help sway local school board races. And so
Yeah.
that's why they're trying to tell you that your vote doesn't matter, because your votes do matter, especially in a country where a lot of races are decided by just literally a handful of votes. Like even at the presidential level, there were 150 million votes cast last time, and Joe Biden became president because of 45,000 votes. That's nothing.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing is to continue to use your voice after you vote. Like I really encourage participation in society, right? So, like, if you hear something about a school board, call your local school board member and tell them. And you know why that matters? Because one, they all believe that if one person is calling, there are 10 to 20 people who are not. So
Mhm.
they automatically they automatically are like, oh, one person called, but that means X people are concerned, and then they start to freak out. The second thing is that they pass a lot of these laws and stuff against us because they think nobody is looking and nobody is caring. And if you pick up the phone, don't send an email, because they kind of disregard emails and they disregard emails and social media stuff. But if you literally pick up the phone and say, I don't like this bill, again, they freak out because they're like, oh my God, people are looking, people are listening, people care.
Mhm.
And so again, y'all, in this year, especially down ballot, where so many things are on at stake, like consider using your voice. Everybody's got a lot going on, but honestly, if I can, and I do this, if I can spend an hour every day on social media, I can spend 5 minutes to call my state representative. I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I can put them on hold while I'm scrolling. You know,
Right.
like while I'm scrolling through my TikTok or my Instagram, I can be on hold. And then when they come off hold, they'll talk to you for a minute. Like, this is who I am. I live in the district. This is what I like, or this is what I don't like. And they're like, thanks for calling, click. It's really simple, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But they try to convince people that folks don't matter, so that none of that, so that they don't have to deal with that.
Right. Right. Yeah. So we got a lot of work to do.
Oh
We
my
have to keep
God.
going, and we just can't get discouraged when that, because there is a means to the end, and we definitely have to keep pushing forward, and we have to mobilize as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we're not being targeted because we don't deserve. We're being targeted because they know how powerful we are.
Right. Exactly.
And they know that in us is the power to bring about a totally different society, which is
Yeah.
why they are working so hard to um stop us from manifesting.
Right. Right. Well, Amara, I won't take up too much more of your time. I enjoyed this conversation. Um, and again, thank you so much for your wisdom and your guiding light.
Thank you so much for yours.